Thank you all for coming this morning, and welcome to Source's Community Involvement, Dispelling Myths, Providing Tips panel discussion. My name is Shane Bryan, and I'm the Assistant Director at Source, the Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning here at Johns Hopkins University Health Professional Campus. We work with not only the Bloomberg School of Public Health, but we also work with the schools of medicine and nursing. You'll continue to see a number of different opportunities available for you through Source, and we challenge you to take advantage of as many opportunities as you can throughout your year here, be it a service learning course, tri-school day of service, the HIV counseling and testing program, and so much more. We are joined today by a group of amazing individuals to whom I'm entirely grateful for not only agreeing to share their stories and tips with you, but for the great work that they do with the community through their various roles and organizations. I will let these folks introduce themselves shortly, but first, I want to take you back a couple of months, before many of you have arrived in Baltimore. In the wake of the events on April 27th, the world watched the media show images of fires, burning buildings, people throwing rocks at police, large groups of young people running, armored vehicles in the streets, military personnel on street corners, chaos. The world then awoke on April 28th to headlines that read, and I quote, "Baltimore burns. Riots erupt in Baltimore. 1,000 black Baltimore rioters smash police cars, attack motorists in frenzied protests. Baltimore in flames as rioters target police. Rage." What you didn't hear or see were the peaceful demonstrations the 6 days prior to April 27th's unrest. You didn't see a community coming together before the sun came up on Tuesday, April 28th, to begin cleaning up the streets of broken glass, cleaning up looted buildings, sweeping up trash in the streets. By 8:30 that morning, the people of Baltimore came together and cleaned any destruction that took place the night before. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the community had come together and continued marching peacefully, demonstrating what they knew as the real Baltimore. By early afternoon, people filled the streets, not to be violent or destructive. No, they came together as one Baltimore, one community, showing the world that Baltimore wasn't what they saw the night previous. This is a city of love, it's a city of determination, it's a city of talent, and a city of hope. However, it is also a city where generations of people have experienced oppression, lack of opportunity, systematic inequality, police brutality, disappearing resources and support, and obstacles to many things many of us consider to be basic, such as healthy food or adequate housing and healthcare. While many of you will only be in Baltimore for the next 10 months, 1 month already down, many of you will take career paths that involve working directly with or alongside community. Knowing and understanding the history of community, the relationships between institutions and individuals will prove vital for your work. Over the next 45 minutes, you'll hear from these folks about how they work with the community, myths of working with the community, and tips for you to consider as you become involved. All right, enough from me. Let's go ahead and let these panelists introduce themselves, who've so graciously volunteered to share their experiences with us today. We'll start with brief introductions from the panelists, and then I prepared a few questions for them. However, I'd like for you all to think of any questions that you might have, and we'll have time at the end of the panel for you all to ask those questions. So panelists, please start by sharing your name, the organization or program you represent, your role, and in what capacity you work with the community. So Nancy, if you wouldn't mind starting, please.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Blackwell. I'm the Executive Director of CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Baltimore City. CASA is a national organization, and you may have heard of it in your own cities where you're from. But we serve foster children in Baltimore City. CASA is one of 949 programs around the country. Baltimore City CASA is the largest CASA program in the state of Maryland. And last year we hosted several Johns Hopkins students, and it was a great experience.
My name is Vanya Jones. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Health, Behavior, and Society. Most of the work I do is community-based work here in Baltimore. It's around injury prevention. I focus a lot on adolescence and youth violence prevention. I also focus on older adult drivers and older adults aging in place in a city where you can imagine there's old housing stock. There might be some issues around letting people in your house. So working with community groups and agencies that serve those populations. I also work with students, so I teach. I co-teach program planning for health behavior change. This will be the first year that we don't have a practicum associated with that class. Unfortunately, your class will be the class that doesn't get the practicum. But if you're interested in the type of work I do, please stop by and see me.
Hi, my name is Kelly King. I am a third-year doctoral student in health behavior and society. I engage with the community in a couple of roles. In my work for my dissertation, I do kind of prison reform broadly, but I work with women who have served time in prison and jail and are transitioning back into communities. This summer I had the opportunity to work for the mayor's office, and I was working to design a program to better link our city's most vulnerable residents, those who are chronically homeless with substance abuse and behavioral health issues, to more appropriate care through redesigning the 911 system. I also am the teaching assistant for the Baltimore Community Practicum course, which is a wonderful practicum-based course that places students at agencies and community-based organizations across the city, and I highly recommend it. Just gonna put a quick plug in there.
Great. My name is Patrick Dymond. I'm the volunteer coordinator at Healthcare for the Homeless. Healthcare for the Homeless is a 170-person organization right here in downtown Baltimore, not too far from here. And we provide outpatient medical, mental health, pediatric, outreach, case management, social work, a bunch of wraparound services to people experiencing homelessness in Baltimore. I work with the community on building partnerships with students, people who want to contribute to our work, our mission, and I also contribute to the community through living here in Baltimore City as well, and getting that perspective too, very much like all of you now. So thank you for letting us be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Washington Cole. I am a 6th-year MD-PhD student. I'm in my 4th year in the doctoral program in health behavior and society. I, too, have a number of different ways that I've been engaged here in Baltimore City and on campus, the first of which I have been a student governing board member for SOURCE for the entire time that I've been here, which has been amazing. I've had a lot of different opportunities for one-time service, but also service learning opportunities to volunteer through SOURCE. Most recently, my service learning work was through the Baltimore Community Practicum course, which I took with Kelly as my TA. It was an amazing experience, and I did it as a part of completing my a certificate in community-based public health, which was a great option to kind of pull together my academics in a more rigorous way around community service and service learning. And additionally, I'm doing a certificate in maternal and child health. So my most recent project through the Baltimore Community Practicum course was with the Southeast Early Head Start Center, or program, excuse me, at Kennedy Krieger Institute. And I was working on program self-evaluation, self-assessment, and trying to understand more about how the program functions in areas that could be improved, things that were being done well. And it was just an enjoyable time getting to know the participants in the program, the staff who are so committed to that work, even through different challenges. They were definitely open. The morning after the uprising in Baltimore, and I was able to be there to work with them. And so I agree with all that has already been said, and I'm excited to talk with you more about Baltimore.
Hey, well, thank you all so very much for being here again. So the first question that I have for you all, how or has the events following the death of Freddie Gray and the Baltimore Uprising affected your work and the communities you serve?
Because CASA serves children in foster care, there were several children, or I should just say young people, there were several young people who were involved in the uprising that were arrested. And
several of those young people were foster children. And oftentimes when foster children get arrested, or just think about your own family, and let's say your kid got arrested, and your kid would call you and say, "Mom, I got arrested, can you come and get me?" Well, when you're in foster care, you may have to call your social worker. If you get arrested after 5 p.m., no one may be there to take your call, so you may end up staying in jail overnight or over a weekend if it's on a Friday or a Saturday. And you know, you have to wait until the state social worker is contacted in order for you to get picked up. So some of the events that we saw on TV, we think about how they affect regular children or children that live with their families, but the events affect children who are in foster care very differently. We also had a transgender youth who was arrested during the uprising that was a foster child. And we may not think about how transgender people in our city are affected by something as simple as a juvenile arrest, but where do they go in the juvenile justice system? Yes, this may be a male person presenting as a female, and how do we respond to where this child or young person gets placed within the foster care juvenile justice system? So there were, you know, there were lots of things that we saw happening on TV, that we saw happening in our community, and CASA had to think about it from a totally different angle and a totally different viewpoint about children who are wards of the state and how this affects them. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the CASA office is right across the street from the main police station. So we were essentially locked out of our offices because the National Guard had set up on our street. So in addition to us attempting to deal with the issues of some of the foster children that were arrested, we had nowhere to go for our office. So, you know, as selfish as it is that we think about our own space and where we are as we attempt to do work for the community, it also affected us from a business lens.
So I wanted to defer if anyone else. So one of the projects that I work on and that I have had the pleasure to build over the years that I've been here in Baltimore is with Big Brothers Big Sisters of the greater Chesapeake area as well as in Philadelphia. Right after this happened, the fallout for Big Brothers Big Sisters in a project that I'm working on, they received roughly in the neighborhood of 12,000 phone calls for people to become mentors. That sounds fantastic, and it is fantastic. But those few thousand people who called panned out to be around 500 people who actually filled out applications, who panned out to be around 30 people who got additional mentors. And so one of the things that we are looking at in the city is how do we build infrastructure for the young people in the city. And Big Brothers Big Sisters has been around for a while. I tell this story because of twofold. One is I think there's a lot of interest in people want to be involved, and we saw that with my work at Big Brothers Big Sisters. Oh, I should tell you, the project is pairing youth who went to the emergency department as a result of a fight with a mentor who's been trained to sort of talk about just sort of personal agency to reduce recidivism when it comes to more serious violence, because we know once you've been injured and sought medical treatment for violence, you're more likely to engage in more serious violence after that. And so what we're trying to do is decrease that, you know, cut the pipeline off. But one of the things that's happened in the mentors that have come in is we've also experienced an additional backlash of people signing up and then not realizing how big a commitment this is that they're taking on. And so there's been twofold. There's been people who have entered into Baltimore and seen the city from a different perspective that they didn't think they would ever see because this prompted them to do that. There were also people who signed up who really weren't ready for what they were signing up to do. And the other thing that we know about mentoring is that if you decide to mentor a young person and then pull out prematurely, you're yet another adult who's let this person down. And so we know that from the research that we've done in the past. And I share that because I think there is a place for even those people who decided this was too much for them. That might not have been the place. So the emotionality of what happened, I think, pushed us all to consider what our role is and how we can do it. But I also think there needs to take a step back and say, how do I actually serve best? What is one of the roles that I can do in the city? Because now I'm working with young people who've been paired with these individuals, and they no longer have a mentor. And I will tell you, that's a very challenging place to be with a young person that has signed up and who's really invested and is really trying to work, and now they've been let down yet again. So I think the double-edged sword is, how do we all fit and how do we serve the population that we live with every day?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was most instructive for me is understanding the language people use to describe other people and to describe communities. In framing Baltimore, Shane described, maybe he didn't actually use the word resilience, but the people as Baltimore as loving, as hardworking, as hopeful, as committed. And he also pointed to structural inequalities and injustice that have existed in this city and in this country for generations, for centuries even. However, although that is a language and a way of talking about people and talking about communities that has in some ways emerged in some areas and spaces and places where it wasn't before, I think also the language has been polarizing. So you have some people who are acknowledging structural injustice and acknowledging the inherent dignity and value of individuals, including our young people who have been exploited and stigmatized. But then you also have stigmatizing language that further, it's almost like pathologizing the communities and suggesting that there's something wrong with the individual people, that there's something problematic about individual people without giving the structures that are in place there just due in being oppressive forces in some cases, and differentially oppressive to certain communities and disproportionately so. And so while it was really exciting to hear more and more people talk about these structural issues and to be more humble in how we describe our neighbors and friends, it was also disheartening to see that, there were people who were honestly speaking from a place of fear and concern, genuine concern about a community, but doing so in a way that really set up our neighbors and community members as something other than, fully human with their own challenges and also resilience and assets. I think my understanding, at least, of the different perspectives and the different language and the different framings of the narrative that are available to us, my understanding of those things have changed, and I think the way people have expressed them has changed in a number of different ways that is really instructive.
I guess the perspective I'd like to add is that of being able to work for the mayor's office this summer. I was really interested, I guess, before and after, in kind of having an experience working in city government, and it was fascinating to be there kind of in the aftermath of what transpired. And in Katie talking about language, it's so funny, like when you work for the city, you're not allowed to use the word riot, you can only say civil unrest, and there are all these terms that we use to talk about these things that are going on. And I was fortunate enough to be, the city has structured its budget based on main outcomes, like stronger neighborhoods, healthier city, safer streets, and I got to sit on some of those committees. And what was interesting in terms of the change and what I saw was that from a government perspective, we're put in a position where we're being turned to, the mayor's being turned to for solutions, and they're not easy solutions necessarily to these issues. And so that can be kind of scary, I guess, for those people in positions of power, but it was really exciting for me, because if you were somebody with an idea, people I think were a little bit more willing to hear it, because we were looking kind of outside of our traditional means to come up with answers. And so I guess just in line with that, I was also like all of my work has been kind of community-based, participatory, and I see myself in my role with the community as being a voice and being able to grant access to institutions of power, to those who have been traditionally kind of blocked out from those institutions. So I've been able to do that a bit. The city's response has been kind of driven by this One Baltimore initiative, and I think that there are parts of that that are really great, and I think that the optimistic side is that people have been able to come together, and there's been a renewed interest and reinvestment in some of these structural issues that have existed for generations in our city and trying to come up with new solutions. I think the downside to that is that it's never good to come in with lots of good ideas, come to the community and tell them what you're going to do to fix all of their problems when there are infrastructure in these communities, there are leaders in these communities, and we need to be giving them the resources to do the job that they know how to do. You know, community members, whether they're community leaders in position of power or not, are experts of their own experience. You know, I know we like to sit here at Hopkins and spit out facts and talk about how we're experts, and we are as well, but my experience in working with the city has been trying to encourage us to invest resources to build up the infrastructure of our neighborhoods like Sandtown, Winchester, and of Penn North. And the last piece before I pass the mic is that, you know, the thing that was most amazing to me about the civil unrest was that if you go to that neighborhood, and I had been to that neighborhood before and after, and you go to that Penn North neighborhood, and it really, aside from the CVS having been burnt down, does not look much different post-riot. This is a neighborhood that had many vacant houses, and like the infrastructure of it was such that it's scary to me that you can have a riot and the neighborhood looks about the same. So just to give that perspective to those of you who are new to the city.
Speaking of perspectives, one thing that comes to mind, I just thought of this actually, because I haven't thought about it in a while, is that during the riots there was a curfew as well, which you may be aware of, which meant that people weren't allowed to be on the streets after a certain hour. I don't even remember when it was. 10 o'clock, right? So for us, at Healthcare for the Homeless, we had to think immediately. We think of our population. We think of people experiencing homelessness, many of whom may be sleeping on the streets. What does that mean for them if they're not allowed to be on the streets? And what does that mean that they are not only on the streets that night, but we apply this blanket policy without thinking about what our population might do, how law enforcement might interact with those folks. Luckily, through our partnerships with city government, with community organizations, we were able to highlight that situation such that we didn't see, or the police officers didn't force people experiencing homelessness to move, because really, where would they move? This points to some of those bigger issues that we're talking about. Enforcing a curfew on homeless folks, telling them to go somewhere else would be pretty complicated since they don't have a home to go to. It points to those bigger, complex, layered issues that one of my coworkers brought up. She used the term that the uprising was really just a surfacing of issues of inequity, and I've taken to that approach since then. These are issues that are wrought in history and complex social issues, and I'm very interested in seeing and being part of solutions that are offered and contested and morphed and tried and reformed. But for us, we see our position at Healthcare for the Homeless as advocating for our population who are not at the focus of these kind of big decisions. So we practice advocacy in many ways, and bringing up that one point there was one such way that we were advocating for our population.
Thank you all. Many students come to Baltimore with preconceived notions about our city, either from HBO's The Wire or various headlines and media coverage. How can you help these people see Baltimore through your lens rather than the lens of the media?
That's a tough one. I'm going to take that. Yeah, that's definitely, the first thing people say when you say that you're moving to Baltimore is, oh, The Wire, and for a lot of people, that's their only point of reference. I found that what was particularly frustrating for me as the riots were going on is the way that they were covered across the country, and I think that there's going to be a lot of healing that's going to need to be done in the city for the way that those acts were portrayed nationally. I guess that my answer to how can we help these students see Baltimore through their own lens is go out there and see Baltimore, get involved in your community, see what's actually going on. This is a city that is an awesome place to do public health work because we are struggling with a lot of the very real issues that were presented in The Wire. But I think that when we paint with broad strokes and sensationalism and we only highlight the violence and that's the only thing we pay attention to, it becomes tricky. I was fortunate enough to be able to peacefully protest in 5 marches that went on in the aftermath of the riots, and where were those images in the media? Like, there was so much beauty in the city in those times and so much connection, and that was not being represented. And so, I would just encourage people to go out there and see for themselves and make your own opinion about the city. And I think it'll definitely surprise you. I've been here 3 years now, and there's overwhelmingly more good than bad, overwhelmingly.
Yeah, I have to, kind of bounce off the more good than bad perspective on this, because Baltimore has given me, even beyond my education, much more than I have given it. I have had some amazing and wonderful, just even recreational experiences being in Baltimore, right down the street from, well, I moved since, but in Mount Vernon, there's Center Stage, which is an amazing opportunity for theater and musicals, and I have a student membership that costs $50 for the whole year, and I can go see any show for free. I have a membership at the Reginald F. Lewis African American History Museum, which is right downtown. Again, tons and tons of events all the time, all for free if you're a member. I have just, had vegan soul food on the west side at the Land of Kush that is just like the most delicious. I didn't even know that I could even imagine being a vegan until I went to the Land of Kush and had that mac and cheese. It's just like the gifts of Baltimore keep on giving, from Artscape to the Maryland Film Festival to just meeting people and being able to learn from them, to worship with them, and all I've done is, frankly, learned a lot here in the 4 walls of Hopkins, and learned a lot outside of the 4 walls of Hopkins through my community work. And so I just, there's a faculty member at the School of Medicine named Donna Maggot who sends out these emails about Baltimore. If you have friends at the School of Medicine, they can probably get you on it. But, the way that she ends every single email, they're about like a page and a half long of like all the things going on in Baltimore every single weekend. And she says, whatever you do, just get out there and do it. Just go for it. And that's not to say that, at every turn you're going to like have so much fun because you're going to be in biostat, you're going to be in epi. That's not going to be all that fun all the time. And also it's a city, and like any other city, you need to be careful. You need to make sure that you are mindful of your surroundings, and just respectful in general of the things that are going on around you. Almost just like observant, pay attention to what's going on around you. But when you're doing that, it's not about being afraid. It's about really taking in your experiences and learning from, even, like I said, the recreational experiences. Some of the best learning that I've done has been, in some of the indie films that I've seen at the Maryland Film Festival or the Charles Theater.
Okay, so I share with you what I teach. I teach program planning for health behavior change. What you've been asked to do by the 2 people who just spoke to you on this committee is go out there and do Baltimore. Well, to me, that's behavior. You're going to go out there and do something. And when we do that, if I think of this as, and I ask you to bear with me because in my house, when I start talking about building behavior, everyone rolls their eyes. And they're like, she's about to go there, and we just need to deal with this because this is what she does for a living. So here we are. You've been told to go out there and just do something. Well, if you sort of think about this from a program planning perspective and the talents that you are building here, which is what you will take, the first thing I say to you is you have opinions about Baltimore. So how many of you have seen The Wire? You came here seeing The Wire. So you have an opinion that fictionally might have formed some of your opinions about Baltimore, and you might have even done, I hear there's a Wire tour out there, but what that says to me is that, yeah, I know, right? What that says to me is that you already have a glass that's full of opinions about this city. And if I'm going to ask you to change that, I need to look at those opinions and think about what they are and think about who formed them for you and how. When I first came here, I am an alumna of this great institution as well. When I came here and was telling people back home, I'm from Ohio, where I was going, I had a longtime family friend that said to me, and this was a much older woman that said to me, you know, when we used to be bad as little girls and my mother wanted to really scare us, she'd say, I'm going to send you to Johns Hopkins so they can do experiments on you. Are you kidding me? I have never seen The Wire, but that was my introduction to Baltimore and to Johns Hopkins. And so if we take that from a behavior standpoint of asking you to go out and do something, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what's formed your opinions, who influences your opinions, and has anyone from Baltimore had a stake in that opinion making of yours? Have you spoken to anyone from Baltimore? So the first thing that we tend to do in behavior change is understand the theoretical underpinnings, which we're not going to talk about right now, but diversify what's happening. Understand that there are more perspectives that can help your glass either grow or make room for more information. To help you change your opinion, to help you move to maybe be considerate of joining a meetup group, going to center stage, going to a park to hear a free concert. But first, I challenge you to take a step back and think about your opinions and how can you diversify that opinion for yourself? What is your sphere and your influence, not just your classmates, who are great to have, but there's a lot of people who are on this campus who are from Baltimore. You know, I'm not even asking you to step outside your comfort zone. I'm just asking you to diversify your opinion so you can move forward and maybe do some of the stuff that you were asked to do. If you take my class, you might learn a little bit more about that.
Great, thank you all. Source, in partnership with various faculty, staff, students, and community leaders, has 3 online modules to prepare students, faculty, and staff, and other Hopkins representatives for accountable, responsible, authentic, collaborative, academic community partnerships. We urge you all who intend to become involved in the community, who are interested in the community, to view these modules. Panelists, you are each aware of the storied history between Hopkins and the community, and Vanya alluded to that a little bit. Keeping that history in mind, how do you approach your partnership activities in order to continue down a positive path?
So when a child is abused or neglected, a phone call is made to the emergency hotline. Most of the calls in Baltimore City come from Johns Hopkins staff. So if you are a nursing student, or if you just happen to be doing your practicum in the ER, or if you're a medical student, you may encounter a family that has issues of abuse and neglect. And because of that relationship with the child welfare system and the potential of you all being involved in that relationship, I think that there are lots of opportunities for students to sort of reflect on what it is that you want to do once you leave this institution. I think there are so many opportunities, you know, just listening to the other panelists, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, I want to do that. And I feel like such a slouch, actually.
Not a slouch.
But you know, I think that there are so many opportunities for community partnerships, just within your academic study, and then externally from your academic study. There are lots of volunteer opportunities. CASA is one thing I did not mention. It's only 10 of us. I have a staff of 10, but we have 250 volunteers who advocate on behalf of children. And I think that as you all develop yourselves and think about your experiences, and you know, sit in Vanya's class and get exposed to all things Baltimore, I think that you will also get exposed to other interesting potential community activities and community partnerships. I hope you find them through Source, but you may find them on your own as you sort of navigate through your everyday.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I'm a little opinionated, as you all can tell. One thing that I want to say as someone who's been a student here, who sends students out, who challenge you to go out and be a part of Baltimore, remember what you take with you. Remember the experience and opinions that you bring out, because they will come out. They will show up in some way, shape, or form. And that's vice versa. So we can either move the agenda along and make it better. We can sort of, in my case, the start of my opinion, which is, you go to Johns Hopkins, so they experiment on little children. That is a part of my history of understanding this institution. I had to decide that I was okay with that as a part of my history, but also that that's not exactly how I choose to proliferate the relationship. So we can go out, and you have talents. You came here. Congratulations to all of you for being students at this institution. You got in. You beat out other people. I probably shouldn't say it that way, but you did make it in. And so you come here with talents. You will hone those talents. You will become scholars in your own right. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with using those talents for the city. There's nothing wrong with going out there and sharing your talents with a city that has additional talents that can share with you. We've heard that the city gives to me so much more than I give to it in some cases, and I'm grateful for that. What I ask you to do is remember that you're their partner. Your talent isn't the trump, it is a piece. And so if we remember that, and I try and remember that as I go out and work in schools and work with organizations and community groups, they work with me. Sometimes they defer to me when they have to introduce Dr. Jones. But I also realize that my one piece is a big part of a whole picture. And so I challenge you, being a student here and having those talents doesn't make you bad or big bad Hopkins or evil. It makes you a part of it, and possibly a good part of the solution if you're willing to share it with the community that we live in.
I'm just going to share a story about an experience I had my first year here. I was working on a project where we were going and recruiting men for an HIV testing and treatment study from venues around Baltimore. So, and it was MSM, or Men Who Have Sex with Men. So we were at a number of gay bars and recruiting people to participate in this study. And so this is something I had done in Atlanta and I had done in other cities, and we had tried to make it really cool. We had like iPads and like glow sticks and condoms and everything. And so then somebody came up to me, and as I was asking if they were interested, and because we were recruiting this population to take part in research, there was a lot of pushback in speaking to what you said about Hopkins' history of research with the community. There has been a lot of good, but there's also been a lot of not good. And I consider the opportunity to be here and to study here and to learn here, I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for it every day. This is a wonderful place. But as being part of that place, we need to know our past. And so I had somebody come up to me and said, I've seen you guys out here for like the last 10 years, and you're doing the same thing, and you're recruiting us into these studies, and our HIV rate among men who have sex with men of color in the city is still increasing. It's not working. Like, why would I continue to give my time to you? And it was like a great question, and I didn't have a good answer for it, and it made me think critically about that work I was doing, and I think that there is certainly value in doing research, but it made me realize that maybe that wasn't the role that I wanted to play in public health, and maybe I wanted to take on a more direct path. Additionally, I think that you really need to study up. Watch that module 2 on the history of Hopkins and Baltimore, because when you're out there and you're working with the community, these are real things. People have been displaced, neighborhoods have changed. There's lots of stuff that has gone on, and so when you go in there thinking that you're gonna do a great job and really improve health and bolster condom use, I think those intentions are really great. But don't be surprised if you're met with a little bit of reticence around just jumping into what you're asking for, because you're not the first person who's come out into the community from Hopkins, and you certainly won't be the last. But I think that it's on you to both know that history, be respectful of that history, and be part of the positive change. The institution, especially in the aftermath of the riots with our Engage Baltimore event, they have been absolutely public about wanting to build and improve that relationship with the surrounding community here in East Baltimore, and the larger city. And I think that it's something I say a lot, but each of us who do work in the community, we're representing Hopkins to the people that we work with. And so we have the opportunity to either improve or to hurt that relationship. And I think that knowing the historical context of anything in your work is unbelievably important, whether that's going out into the community and community-based work or when you're crafting a research question. So I really urge you to get to know the history here so that you can be better equipped than perhaps I was to answer that pushback that I experienced.
That's a great tip, and if we could move down the same path, what are some other tips that you would like to provide folks who are maybe new to Baltimore or even urban settings about how to get involved or ways to get involved in the community? Any tips that you'd like to share?
Well, speaking as the person who receives a lot of the inquiry about ways to be involved, on a really basic level, when you approach organizations, people, groups, and want to lend your support, it's helpful to frame that inquiry with some information about yourself, your skills, your interests, things you've worked on in the past. At Healthcare for the Homeless, if you are looking to partner with us, it's really helpful almost to treat it like applying for a job. That kind of exchange is really helpful in formatting what you're presenting to the organization and then how it might fit into the work that's going on.
I would venture to say that if a really committed, say someone who was interested in stats and was committed and came, so see your skills would be useful to a community organization if you committed and came and treated it as such, and that is your talent. That is the skill that you could be building here. So, just want to echo that because you're a scientist and building those skills doesn't mean that you can't serve Baltimore using those skills. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you possibly a part of the story.
Yeah, certainly. So that's what I would say. Make sure that you're intentional about that approach and realizing that there may be pre-existing pathways and partnerships that already exist since there's a new cohort of MPH students every year or so. Chances are we could build on something that other folks have done as well, which is extremely helpful for the organization as well.
The MPH students that were at Healthcare for the Homeless, and also what Vanya just added about your potential gift that you would bring to an organization. This past year at CASA, we had several Hopkins students. My favorite student, who I didn't like at first, an MPH student who did a magnificent data project for us. One of the tips that I tried to kind of bring him along as he did his work was not to be so judgmental about the data. We've been around for a long time. We've served this population for a long time. We already know what they look like. I just really needed him to kind of fill in some of that information looking at our data. So one tip that I would give to all of you is to, when you work with a community partner, they already know their warts. They know they have 3 noses on their foreheads, and it's okay. You may not know that, oh my God, these people really exist. It's like the purple M&M. But you may want to kind of...
Does it really exist?
They exist, yes. You may want to sort of tone down the shock and awe and, read a couple articles or, just kind of do a little bit of background research before you come so that you don't come across too judgmental with what it is that you see. There are warts in Baltimore and purple M&Ms.
I think Katie had something to possibly share as well. If you have, next we're going to go to audience questions or comments. So if you wouldn't mind, if you have a question or a comment, coming down to the front to the microphones. We are recording this session. They're right down here in the front. So if people have questions or comments, want to start making their way down. But sorry, Katie.
Some advice that someone gave me when I was preparing to do my practicum experience through the Baltimore Community Practicum course was under-promise and over-deliver. It's not that you undersell yourself or you what do you call it? You belittle what your talents are or what your skills are, but you do want to come in with some level of humility, because you would much, much rather say, well, here are the really feasible things that I know I can do with my limited time and my limited availability, and my partner's limited time and limited availability. We have like this 1 hour of overlap, or we have this one topic where we're both super interested in getting something done, and better to start with a small task and knock that out of the park and then add to it than to fall into the trap, which is very, very tempting, to be overly ambitious and say, well, I can do this, 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 and that, and then you only do the that and none of the thises. And so, under-promising and over-delivering has, I don't know, it just sets an expectation realistically, and then you can kind of really impress yourself, and you can really end up being impressed with what you can build from the partnership, whether it be with a community-based organization or, with your neighbors in that garden you wanted to start, whatever the case may be.
So I can see a bunch of people running to the microphones, but are there questions? Do people have questions, are there comments or things that you would like for the panelists to discuss more? We want this to be interactive and to answer any questions or concerns or myths that you may have heard. It's right before lunchtime, I know that. Yay, Braveen.
All right. Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay. I would like to ask you, I'll step back. Okay. Could the panel perhaps speak more about some of the great assets that Baltimore has and compared to other American cities? What's so kind of what we can praise about Baltimore and always emphasize, especially for a lot of the MPH students coming from all sorts of different places around the country or the world, that really we want to make sure we emphasize when we're out in the community.
So I'm originally from Detroit, and so coming to Baltimore wasn't worlds of difference, except for that when I got here, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much nicer than Detroit. I love Detroit, but yeah, no, so that's definitely an easy one. And I think that, I could go on for days. I live in the Station North neighborhood, and I think that's similar to Detroit. Something that's wonderful about our city is the artistic current that runs through it. We have Maryland Institute College for the Arts, and there's an open walls project. So you'll see that, especially in my neighborhood, on a lot of the sides of buildings, there's beautiful, beautiful murals. And I'm an art geek, so I think that art heals communities, and so that's something that's really wonderful. Also, just I think that if you look at our Inner Harbor, I don't spend as much time there, but it's pretty, and tourists go to it, so it seems like a thing you should go to. And I don't know, an interesting thing about living in Baltimore is that it's a city of neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods each have distinct personalities, and so it's fun to check out new neighborhoods, and I encourage you to do that, because Charles Village is different than Remington. Single Carrot Theater is in Remington. That's a wonderful spot that I would put a plug out for. And I think it's been really fun for me to kind of explore the neighborhoods, understand the history of them, and kind of see how they interact with each other in this city. Not answering your question, but saying something else that I wanted to say, which is, what do you do when you're wanting to get involved in the community, but you're perhaps new to an urban setting? So I didn't maybe have as much of a transition because I grew up in a neighborhood that looks very similar to the one that I live in now in Baltimore. But I understand, lots of my friends are from Minnesota and places that are very different than Detroit, and so they didn't necessarily have the same framework for understanding cities that I had when I came here. And I just wanted to say that it's okay to have a little bit of discomfort around things that you don't know. It's you don't need to walk in there feeling super confident with something that you haven't tried before, or in a community that you haven't interacted with before. But I would urge you to lean into that discomfort. A lot of times it's not actually acting, but just spending time and sitting with those feelings, and then what's great about Source and the Baltimore Community Practicum course is that it gives an opportunity to kind of be reflexive about your experience with that discomfort if it exists. So even if you don't find that space to kind of unpack your experience in a classroom, I encourage you to do that with your peers and to not beat yourself up about not feeling necessarily 100% comfortable in a new city. A lot of you just moved here, and that's a really natural thing to feel.
So I like the idea that under promise but over deliver. I think the problem that maybe MP students are facing is in my personal opinion, is we're not sure yet what time that we will have, and maybe we have only 1 hour per week or something, and we don't really know that. I think it's really easy it's conceptual to say okay, go and do something in Baltimore, but if you don't really new to the neighborhood and you're just okay, go to Inner Harbor and oh no, what I'm doing 1 hour. So it's really hard to kind of do that. My question is it will be really helpful is could you I'm personally not sure what possibly that I can do in 1 hour in Saturday or something. It would maybe better if there are some listing of the tasks that you kind of want us to do in 1 hour, 2 hour, and we can go and see and then pick it up oh, I can do that. It's 1 hour. I can go there. Kind of
amazing, wonderful, just it's Disneyland of and of course, Shane is going to be really upset with me because he's going to have people emailing him and knocking down his door. But one plug that I would put in is for the student involvement fair. Is that the name of it? Because sometimes I mess up the names of things. Community involvement fair. There we go. On September 16th.
Yes, it is. Good job.
Oh,
12
yeah.
to 3 p.m.
September 16th. Sometime there's ice cream. It's in the afternoon. It'll be right up in Finestone. And there are a number of different opportunities. So I really put my bet down on academic opportunities to engage, scholarly opportunities through coursework and stuff like that, because that was my passion. But I've also done one-time service events through Source. I've done volunteer opportunities where I volunteer every 2 weeks on a Saturday for a couple of hours. The range of opportunities that are available, the ways in which community members and community-based organizations and leaders are welcoming us into the community with open arms is just outstanding and amazing. So the thing is, it's almost sometimes it can be a fire hose coming at you with all the different things that are available. And so you just kind of have to be a little bit reflective, okay, what am I passionate? I was, like I said, deeply passionate about making sure that community service and service learning were a part of my academic path. But if that's not the choice for you, then there's probably a one-time service event or a monthly opportunity or a bi-weekly opportunity that would fit. And Shane and the other staff at Source are your resources to help you find those opportunities. Don't feel like you have to just kind of wander into East Baltimore knocking down the doors of the Men and Family Center, because we already have a relationship with the Men and Family Center, or Healthcare for the Homeless, or CASA. You can hang out with one of the 250 volunteers that Nancy has, and so many different options and opportunities. And also the community-based organizations appreciate when you come through Source, because you can probably get a lot of your questions answered at the level of Source before you get out with the community organization leaders who are immensely busy and have very, very tight schedules just like we do, or if not more, probably more tighter schedules than we do. Tighter schedules, not more tighter, but anyway.
To quote Dr. Barry Solomon, who's the director of the Harriet Lane Clinic, Source is Match.com for you. So in a lot of ways, they have done a lot of the legwork to find partners for you to go be a part of. And if it doesn't work, it's not a huge commitment. As long as you're polite to them, it's a short time. If it does work, you can continue on. But I think his point about Match and Source being about the same age, doing a similar job. So if you really are interested in doing community work and a little concerned about building that relationship, Source has done the legwork. They've developed a relationship
with the caveat, as a person who really champions Source, please go out there and remember that. You know, that you are building on their relationship, or you're going to destroy their relationship. So be thoughtful when you decide to go out, but Source has done a lot of that legwork for you. Very wise question. Remember that when 8 weeks goes by really, really fast, and you are going to be thrown a lot of information in those 8 weeks. So good that you're thinking that way, and you know, you're going to probably maybe want to work, you might want to volunteer, but Source is a good way to try and see the city from a different perspective and contribute without making that big commitment or understanding and having some understanding of what you're being asked of. Great question.
Also say that if you only have an hour a week, or you know, a couple hours a month, or whatever your time commitment is, that's fine. You know, it's okay that you can't commit 15 hours a week to work part-time, but just be upfront with what your time constraints are, you know, so that you're not going in and signing up for something and it's going to be all this time and then you don't really have it. You know, people know that you're a student, and I think that it's great that you're already thinking like, I maybe only have this limited time, but I would say that even if it is just an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks, that shouldn't be a reason not to get involved, because there are so many different types of experiences, and I'm sure that you'll be able to find something that'll work with that.
So thanks. Speaking of limited time, see, there's another question. If you want to come down after, we have ran out of time, unfortunately. We are constricted to the 1 hour, but I'm sure the panelists may give you a few minutes once we wrap up here to answer your question. But thank you all so very much for coming today. Thank you, the panelists, for all of their wise thoughts and help. Another point I just want to direct you to, the weekly service scoop, the scoop. If you don't receive that, send an email to source@jhu.edu with subscribe in the subject line. You'll start receiving it. We send out a weekly newsletter every Tuesday. That's a really good opportunity to start learning about ways to get involved. So again, thank you all so very much. The panelists, thank you. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you around the corner.